As we've all heard, airline travel is the safest travel that you can be involved in. Unfortunately, as we also know, when there is an accident, it's almost always catastrophic and either results in serious personal injury or loss of life. And so we're consulted with frequently by people who have either suffered a personal injury as a result of an airline or aircraft accident, or even worse, a family member who's lost a loved one. And the questions that they'll have is when do they sue, who do they sue, and where do they sue? And surprisingly, unlike the more common tort cases like an automobile accident or even a normal products liability case, those questions are not always so easily answered. And so it's important that you consult with someone who's experienced in the field to be able to answer those questions and answer them accurately for you. The first question, in terms of when do we file, the international, if it's an international flight, it's generally governed. It used to be the Warsaw Convention, it's now the Montreal Convention, and that provides the different locations where accidents and lawsuits relating to those accidents need to be pursued and when they need to be pursued. Usually in international incidents, it's a 2-year statute of limitations where you have 2 years to file a legal claim. However, if it involves domestic cases, those are usually governed by the state where the lawsuit will be filed, whether federal or state court. And so it's important to know those statutes of limitations. In California, the statute of limitations is almost always going to be 2 years for that personal injury or loss of life. Unfortunately, it can be complicated by different issues, including whether or not there are going to be governmental entities that are involved in that case, and if so, tort claims need to be filed within different prescriptions. And so it's important, again, to consult with someone who can advise you with respect to that. Beyond the question of when a suit needs to be filed, you need to determine where it needs to be filed. And as we've talked about, in international cases, those are governed by the Montreal Convention, and domestic cases, those are also can be filed generally the place where the flight initiated or where the ultimate destination was, and usually will be filed closer to the home of the person, and unless it's a business trip and it's not as convenient, but usually closer to the departure point or the point which is closest to the potential client's or the plaintiff's home. And that's perfectly appropriate. However, again, those bring in different laws that are governed by the state where the lawsuit is applied. And the most important question, and the most frequently asked question, is who do I sue? And that also is going to be very fact dependent, depending upon the incident, where it occurred and how it occurred. You might have claims that can be brought against governmental entities, but more commonly you're looking at the airline or the manufacturer of the plane itself. You might be able to sue the subcontractors that possibly worked for the general contractor or the manufacturer of the plane itself, who are responsible in some way for that defect or for that malfunction that led to the problem. There are, as we said, also sometimes going to be governmental claims that can be required, that might require tort claim filings, and those are important to do quickly, and so it's important that you consult with a lawyer quickly after any accident to determine whether or not you have a claim, and if so, where it needs to be filed, when it needs to be filed, and who those appropriate entities are that you would be looking at, hopefully to be able to provide you some justice and compensate you for the loss that you suffered as a result of the accident.